good to meet you both.
Likewise.
I'm actually really glad that I got both of you on this call. I think when Gia connected us, right? You guys were with Gia, is that right?
Yeah.
Cool. Because I was actually like worried that it might just be one of you, which would be awesome. But I love having both of you on because whether you like it or not, we're going to talk about like working together as a married couple with kids. Because I have 2 kids and a wife, and a lot of curiosity there of how that goes. So we'll talk about that today. But I have a bunch of sort of background on the 2 of you, but I have to admit I've actually never been to the restaurant. I've been to Austin a bunch of times. I think the last time I was there was for like an indie chefs, like an indie chef event where we cooked it at foreign and domestic or something, and we ate around everywhere. But
when were you at foreign and domestic?
So I did a course for this indie chefs dinner there like a couple of years ago, and I think that's the last time I was in Austin. I mean, I've been to Austin a bunch of times, but that was the last time I was there. I think it was like 2 years ago, something like that. But we didn't see you, so unfortunately. But next time I go, I promise I will definitely be hitting you up and checking it out. Ironically, like this is like the week of Austin. I have my some close friends of mine moved there a long time ago and opened up a restaurant called Lenoir. And
cool.
Jessica and Todd, we worked together at Boulay many years ago, and they're coming on the show tomorrow, I think, or Friday or something like that.
Oh, cool. We know Fiore really well.
What's that?
We know Fiore really well too.
Oh yeah, and Fiore was just on, and I actually, first of all, like, holy shit, what a story! Like I knew Fiore from like meeting him, but I didn't know his background. I don't know if you know about his background growing up, but
it's crazy.
That was a curveball. But there was a lot I didn't ask him a lot about Austin that I'm going to ask you guys about just to get some tips.
He's a great friend of ours, though.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, you guys are busy. Let's start. First of all, I'm like so surprised we've never met before because of you both worked in New York for a very long time. Tracy, you were at Crew, but Shay was there when you were there, right?
Yes.
And the Del Posto, Blue Hill, and with Mike at Gramercy. And then you both met at Untitled, right?
That's right. Yeah.
That's right. Was that your first spot in New York? Arjav?
Me?
Yeah.
It was. I was in DC before that. So spent 5 years in DC. I worked, my first restaurant job was at a Wolfgang Puck restaurant called The Source there for a year. And then I spent 4 years at a restaurant called Comey, where I feel like I learned as much as I could about hospitality. It's one of the great restaurants in the country, I think. And then moved up in 2015 to help open Untitled, where I met Tracy. And then I was at Gramercy Tavern for a little bit after.
So you went to Gramercy after Untitled as well?
Yeah.
Nice. But you were born in India, right? And then came here?
I was born in India. I grew up in Portland, Oregon. We immigrated to the States in 1999. I was 12 years old. So
99.
I still have like very distinctive memories of India, but I moved to the States. I call Portland home. Portland's like where I grew up and where all my friends are. My parents still live there. So I'm an Oregonian at heart.
What brought them to Portland?
I think my dad and mom were like 2 of the smartest and most creative people I know, but the Indian school system very much at that time was like rewarding people for STEM skills in particular. And like, it was very clear my brother and I didn't have, the output for sort of math and science the same way like some of our peers did. And I think mom and dad were ready to start a new adventure. And also, give my brother and me a shot to do whatever we wanted to and be as creative as we wanted to in our lives, in our field. So, it was really a choice made for like us and like what our futures would look like. So we ended up in Portland because my dad's sister lives there too.
Oh, gotcha. So that's it. That's how you ended up there. And you are from Texas, Tracy, right?
Yes. I'm from Houston.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about this later, but I am curious, like how all of that is sort of impacting how you're raising your kid. But I heard apparently you both sort of not met, but kindled the love that you have today over Negronis. Did you have a wedding, by the way?
Did we have a wedding?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had 2.
You had 2 weddings?
I like the close so much I married her twice.
Were there Negronis at the wedding? Like, is Negroni still like a big part
We
of
were.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. My wife and I used to go to Uncle Boone's, rest in peace, one of the best restaurants ever, by the way.
Good.
And their zombie sling was like unreal. So we made I got the recipe from there. Like we made that at our wedding, which by the way is a terrible idea to have at a wedding because everyone was hammered.
One was plastered by the
Oh
other.
my God. Yeah, it was zombie slings and boulevardiers.
Oh wow.
Everybody was hammered, but
when did you get married?
we got married in 2017.
Okay.
And
The year before me.
What's that?
We got married in 18, so.
Yeah, in my assistant sent me a bunch of background on you all, and I think we have similar sort of trajectories, although I think I'm a lot older than you, but out of deductive reasoning, I think maybe we're similar in age because 82, I think, was when you were born, right?
Yep.
So
great Rolo year, by the way.
It is a great Rolo year. And it's also funny when I my second job in New York, I was working at Tabla, and I worked for free in the mornings at the saloon, Mario's like Salamaria. He had this thing in Union Square, and they didn't pay me for like 6 months. But on my birthday, they gave me a bottle of 1981 Quintarelli Giuseppe because, well, basically they said, just take whatever you want of your birth year. That's my birth year, 81. And so I had that bottle. Ironically, like I held on to it for a long time. And then I developed an allergy to live yeast. And for like 15 years, I couldn't drink wine or beer or sake. So only recently have I been able to.
Did you ever drink that bottle?
Yeah, I did. Fucking awesome.
Okay.
But I got a little sick. But whatever.
It was worth it.
All right. So I still have a little more background because I want to just learn a little bit more about you guys, how you got to where you are. And Tracy, you were in Chicago for a while, and I have to ask, why did you apply at Hot Doug's?
So I guess a little background. So I was graduated from college and in Houston, from the University of Houston for hotel restaurant management. And then I'd kind of shifted my focus from wanting to be, restaurant manager with aspirations of having my own place to I want to try to cook and do my own thing. And so I wanted to learn about, hot dogs and sausage making and, I really just thought it was delicious. I had a good friend there and I would visit Chicago and I always loved hot dogs and there was like an energy with the space. And I was like, cool, I would love to have a, neighborhood place like this that's very energetic and lively and delicious. So I applied to work there with the intentions of maybe I'll do a hot dog shop in Houston. And then he looked at me, he was like, you want to work in the kitchen here? And he was kind of like, what experience do you have in the kitchen? And I said, none, but happy to learn, and he was like, I guess you could maybe be a busser. And then I was like, I want to try this cooking thing. I think I'm going to look somewhere else because they just didn't have any slots it was like a 2-person kitchen. So I ended up working at Lula Cafe after 6 months of begging. And I started off at the bottom as a prep cook and they were incredible. Taught me how to hold a knife, taught me how to set up a station. It really just kind of set the tone for the kind of restaurant we wanted to have.
Yeah. I mean, Lulu, as an institution out there, I was just when I heard Hot Dogs, I was like, that's a departure. That's interesting. I owned a bunch of hot dog restaurants in New York back in the day.
And where?
In Brooklyn and Manhattan. It was called Bark Hot Dogs, and we.
Oh yeah.
We spent a lot of time in a lot of hot dog joints. Hot Dogs being one of them. Rest in peace as well, by the way. So
rest in peace, man.
That it closed. Well, Untitled closed as well. And, I have friends that worked, in that and the MoMA spot. What's it like running a restaurant in a museum? Does that suck? What is it like running a restaurant in a museum?
Yes, it does suck. Short answer.
I think Untitled at the Whitney we learned a ton about that was my first restaurant to open, period. So I was really excited to open a restaurant with Mike Anthony. And two, it was two restaurants in one space. Three, we had Untitled on the ground floor and the studio cafe on the 8th floor, which was like serving toasts and salads and soups. But just to get your mise en place up to the 8th floor, you had to use the elevator shared with the guests. And if you remember, the Whitney was like the biggest museum opening of the year. There was a line down the street in the meatpacking district, just full of tourists from around the world. And so it was just sheer chaos trying to get up, like mise en place, like, your little tray, you'd be open, but you couldn't get up the 8 quart of soup or whatever you needed up the elevator because you literally just couldn't get there. And so there were so many like nuanced challenges about that opening, but it was a fantastic crew and we had a lot of fun.
Was there production on the 8th floor, or was it you had to prep everything and then just bring up for service on the?
We had a big prep kitchen on the bottom floor that huge space. So we did a lot of prep for Untitled because that was a pretty tight, long line. And there's a little space on the upstairs kitchen on the 8th floor, but primarily the big amount of prep was done on the negative floor.
It's so funny because, you worked, that's a big kitchen, and Gramercy is, like a maze of all kinds of, there's a whole bunch of different kitchens, pastry in one area, like it's pretty big. And the spots in DC that you worked at were pretty big. And then you open up a pretty, what seems like, again, I haven't been there, but it seems like I'm guessing a pretty tiny kitchen at Birdie's, right?
Yeah, it's small. It's funny because thinking about kind of my past 19 years of from when I started cooking to now, as I've been kind of reflective lately, starting off in a little small neighborhood restaurant like Lula, it actually feels a lot more like Lula than all of the fine dining restaurants I worked at in New York. And I kind of like that. I like being able to cook and, I'm going to grab this and, I'm going to grab that. Whereas like, I also worked at Del Posto, and if you forgot something downstairs, it was like literally like a 5 minutes off your prep day. You had to go all the way downstairs, all the way around the corner, all the way back. And it just literally took 5 minutes. So 5 minutes, when you have 3 hours to prep is a chunk of time. And so you had to like really have your act together. And I don't know, not to say I don't like to be organized, but I like having everything just, an arm grab away.
Yeah. I mean,
I think it's interesting. It's interesting to me because I feel like it's funny to hear Tracy say that about Lula, because I think the hospitality and the way service feels is the most like Comey. And I think both of us like worked at these bigger restaurants in New York, but like the thing that has always kind of grounded us is like the first restaurants we ever worked at. Like I think both of us got really lucky to work for really incredible people, like honestly our whole career, but like we got really lucky with the first place we ever started because I think it set a foundation for what to expect, both out of ourselves in this industry and also what to expect out of like a great workplace. And I think both those things have really stuck with us. I think, for me on the hospitality side, I think Comey was the greatest place I'd ever seen, like as far as like restaurant hospitality had gone. And I was like, I learned so much of that restaurant about how to be myself, how to like carry myself on the floor. And a lot of the lessons, I learned, I now teach our staff. But even things like the vacations that we go on where we close the restaurant, that was like a Comey thing.
Yeah.
Like I'd never after Comey, I'd never experienced that again, where like the restaurant would just shut down for a summer vacation every year, and let people go recharge. And I think I remember those days of my career and my life so fondly, in large part because of how much I loved my work. And it was the only time I'd ever like cried when I left like a job because I was so sad.
Too when I left.
When we left Lula, and I think
so much
that I think that tells you a lot about the kind of places that made an impact on us, and a little bit maybe about like the kind of people we are and the things that we gravitate to in restaurants. We're not like, I think we learned a lot working for like the big people and like learned systems and learned how to like organize yourself and how to build protocols and like be great managers. but I think, and leaders, but I think the heartbeat of our restaurant will always be informed by Comey and Luba.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. It reminds me. I have a friend of mine has this restaurant called Tippling House in Charleston.
Yeah, Matthew?
Oh yeah, we worked together years ago at Cafe Gray, and he was talking about they work 5 days and they close at midnight. And I'm curious. I actually wanted to ask you all because, and well, let's wind up a little bit for people that might not know like the structure of Birdie's. Again, I haven't been there, but I now I know a little bit more about how the service works. Counter service, you walk up, so obviously a lot less service staff. But you guys did a lot up front to take care of the team, right? Paid time off, vacations, health insurance, that kind of stuff. I feel like if you don't do it from the outset, it's like almost impossible to go back and change and do it, right? Like, could you imagine going to like a restaurant, running a restaurant, and then changing from like, okay, I know everybody was working this way, but now it's going to be, completely different, and you're going to have paid time. You'd have to completely change the way in which you operate. Do you feel like there are things that you still that you didn't do when you opened that now you sort of wish you had or are maybe struggling with because you didn't do that when you opened? Like you got so many things right, like health insurance, pay time off, like making sure your team is a tight small group that you can take care of. And I want to definitely talk about that. But are there things that like that it's been when did it open?
2021.
21? Yeah. So, it's been a few years now. Like, are there things that like fast forward, you're like, man, wish I had started this right away?
Honestly, we had so much time to think about what Birdie's was going to be. Arjav and I met in 2016. And, we've been brainstorming on this for a long time. And we also hit the pandemic. And we had even more time to think. We actually signed our lease for Birdie's 3 weeks before the pandemic dropped in that February. Because I feel like in March, everything kind of stopped.
Yeah.
So we just had a lot of time. Time to think. We were furloughed from our jobs that we had kind of in the interim so we could pay the bills. And while we had that time off, we just had a lot of time to chat and think. And, we've worked in restaurants collectively many years, and we've seen a lot of great things. We've seen a lot of things that we weren't feeling and we didn't want to include in our restaurant. So we just kind of sculpted what we wanted. We kind of like made this Venn diagram of all our values and like everything we could dream of. And we just kind of figured out a way, how do we make all the things that we really want in a restaurant? How do we actually implement that logistically? And then counter service happened. We're able to tip out our cooks and dishwashers evenly. And everyone can make a living wage, not just some people on our team. And we don't want to work on Sunday Mondays personally. It's always my favorite week schedule. And I felt like I was a line cook for many years, and I was like, okay, I know the schedule I want, and I'm guessing that's the schedule our team wants. I also don't want to be bothered on Sundays. I don't have to come in if that's my day off and like cover or whatever. Like, I just want to chill on Sunday and Monday and know our team is chilling too, and can plan that time to be with their family or just do whatever they want to do on those same days every week. I also hate making a schedule. I don't like it. So it kind of makes it like, even it makes it clean. Our entire philosophy was like, create the restaurant we've dreamt of our entire lives. And then also, how do we keep it as simple as possible? Because we're both not complicated people, and we just wanted to be straightforward as possible.
I think when we really like started digging through like some of this, like we really went back to first principles on a lot of like just like the structure of a restaurant, right? Like in the business model of a restaurant. We said like, restaurants really haven't changed since antiquity. Like the structure of restaurants haven't really changed since antiquity. And I think for us, it was a matter of like knowing the math of what like labor looks like today and like what real estate looks like today. What does a restaurant have to look like to be functional, both for owners and the team, right? And I think a lot of our thinking was like, this has to be like a happy thing for us. We talked to so many restaurant owners. We're like, don't do it. Don't do it. Worst idea ever. We're like, why do people give their whole life to something and then say like, oh, you're going to end up being, like the famous, like, the joke is like, how do you end up a millionaire? Like, as a restaurateur, you start with $2 million and you're with $1 million. Like I never bought into that. And I think for us, it was like, there has to be a way. We just need to be bold enough to like maybe borrow things that already exist and create our own restaurant, So it's like, okay, does QSR have some like things that win? Yeah, like the service model is interesting. There's food trailers that like get away with this. Like who made the rule that we can do like a fine dining style restaurant with the same kind of caliber of food and even the hospitality, but maybe strip away some parts of the service. And I think one thing we learned after the pandemic, even for our own dining habits, is we liked having a little more space when we ate. Like we liked being able to hang out, just the two of us, without having to like be interrupted every time a server showed up. And I think the most important and the least favorite part of my like meals most times is like when I'm ready to leave, I'm ready to leave. Especially now that I have a kid, like I just want to get out, And I think not having to flag somebody down for a check, whatever, that was an incredible gift for us. When we ate out at these counter service restaurants, we're like, oh, you just get up and leave when you're done. It's great. And I think we put those pieces together and just like, we created something that was like, I think singularly and uniquely like ours. It's very Birdie. It's like, I don't know, like, there's no real analog for what we do, I don't think yet.
Well, I think to pinpoint that, just starting up really quick, but like there were daytime places, doing this. Like in LA, you love like Squirrel and Destroyer. How you could have fantastic food, but like for lunch and grab your ticket, sit down. Oh, wow, that's really incredible. I loved it. And then you can go, So like, I do think that at dinner is kind of like with wine, with a long wine list.
Yeah, but I don't think like those restaurants, like those are to me true counter service restaurants. Like, I think the difference for me is like, I think at Birdie's, like there is service after you sit down. So like once you sit down, you're not like busting your own, like, like you're not busting your own plates. You're not like getting yourself your own water. Like there's a full kind of suite of service that you get that we've paid attention to the things that we really like when we go out. Like we want somebody to bring us water. We want people to show us how to use the restaurant, right? Like we want to feel connected to one person, at least when we sit down. I think that's really important when you eat at a restaurant, and especially like when you're paying a higher price point, right? So I think we want wine service to be like wine service, right? We just, the part that we removed is we didn't want the layers. So we didn't want a captain. We didn't want back waiters. We didn't want front waiters. We didn't want all these layers, or even in a flat restaurant with just waiters, we didn't want like 8 people on the floor plus 3 food runners, they're just like, it didn't make sense.
No,
and
it's so
what
smart.
the labor market, and like knowing what the labor market was bearing with like the kind of talent too, we knew that like for a restaurant like ours that was small and scrappy, we weren't going to get like the top end talent. So we made it like in the dining room. So we made a decision to say, let's hire people with almost no experience, and like let's believe in our own like training program and ourselves to train them up in a way that makes sense for our restaurant. And I think we've cultivated this like incredible suite of like true stars in the dining room, who understand the most important principle of hospitality, which is just hospitality. Like, is our service always technically perfect? Probably not. We're okay with that. I don't think that like makes an impact on like truly on a person's like day. But I think the way we approach hospitality, like the way we're able to like cultivate like an experience that like one size fits one for each guest, I think that's special and unique. And I think that's what brings people back in restaurants.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's the most important tenet of hospitality.
Yeah, it's interesting. The counter service model, when it's just counter service, it like Squirrel or like whatever, going to Shake Shack, right? You go up and then you're kind of done. And I love that you have sort of thought about like what is accretive to the experience versus everything else that isn't. Just strip it away, which by the way means less team. I'm assuming everyone's getting tipped, right? Even the cooks, because they can walk out.
Yeah.
So, cooks and dishwashers.
Awesome. Dishwashers. I mean, it's killer. And I mean, clearly this model works because from what I understand, you paid back your investors within like 9 months, which by the way, like, fuck you. Like, who does that? That's insane. That's amazing.
Well, you can't get the fancy plates, Josh.
Yeah.
You just like,
we bought, yeah, we were just scrappy.
Happy.
It's like startup, our startup cost was really low.
Yeah, yeah.
We raised only $300,000 to open Birdies.
Yeah.
But we did that knowing that we could act. Like, I think we invested far more than that. Now, by far, we doubled that or more into the restaurant since we opened. But we knew we could act, right? Like, we didn't want to have such heavy startup costs, like at the start, not knowing if we were going to be around in a year. So we were like, let's start really scrapping. We bought all our plates from Crate and Barrel. They all chipped. They were gnarly. If you look at our first, 6 months of Instagram photos, they're all on like chipped plates because they weren't built for commercial. We paid $2.99 a plate. We're like, whatever.
And I was like, it's grandma style. We can make it work. Right now.
And also get the revenue in, get the people in, and then you can upgrade. Something Arjav, you said, I don't know where you said it, but I got a note about it that I thought was really smart that I think about a lot is people complain that there's not enough labor. I mean, look, it is tough getting labor, and retention can be a problem. But most of the time, restaurants are creating jobs, not careers. They're this transient thing where it's very clear that you're starting here, so that someday you're going to go do something else. And clearly, if there isn't health insurance, there aren't ways for you to have a life. Then this is not the end for you. And you're going to have to at some point do something else. And what it feels like, and from what you said, it sounds like you're creating careers for people so that it might be a little bit more.
We're attempting to. I I don't want to there's a lot of restaurants that are doing really important stuff around this idea of building careers. I think for us, Tracy and I have such a deep respect for this industry, and for the greats that have come before us, that I think we are we just want our legacy to be but we left this industry just a little bit better than we found it. And I think, for us, that was very much predicated on this idea of making this a sustainable career so that this industry that we care so deeply about can function profitably, happily, for the next generation. I think that's really important. And I think about a lot about how these all our restaurants are filled with these young, impressionable kids, quite frankly, right? There are people who are working restaurants are in their 20s, early 30s for the most part. And they're learning about life and about this industry. And I think it's so important to create a foundation that people can believe that, hey, you know what? I can be a restaurant general manager someday. I can be an owner someday. I can be an executive sous or CDC someday. Now, is everyone going to be able to do that? No. But I think if you can create parameters where people don't feel like they have to compromise their life to fulfill their career, then you're so much more likely to get people who stick around a while, right? I think about family leave. That is such an intrinsic part. We had a kid. If we had a kid, at a restaurant, both of us working in restaurants without family leave, Tracy would probably have had to quit her job, and I would have probably had to quit my job and then find another job in 6 months, right? And that is not a sustainable way to build a career. And honestly, it's not it shouldn't be the responsibility of restaurants. The government should be helping with this stuff. But at the end of the day, if government's not going to help with stuff, we need to start building business models that allow us to build the tools that we need to as a business to keep people longer. Because we're in, I think the thing that we forget about is that we're investing in people all the time. This is enlightened self-interest. This is not just me and Tracy trying to be great. People, we're trying to do that, but this is really good for our business too. We're putting a lot of time and energy into training these people, cultivating them. We want them to stick around as long as possible, especially when you find a star, and you're oh, you're going to be you have the potential to be the general manager of a restaurant or a partner someday. If you see that in somebody early on, it's our goal to invest in those people, but also tell them that this is possible. Your goals are possible. You just have to have the right time horizon. But if you want to do what you want to do, have the right time horizon, we're ready and always willing to talk about it, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I remember by the way, I missed you all at the Philly Chef Conference. I think I left the day you were there, but last year at the LA Chef Conference, the founders of Reher, the organization,
Very cool.
It's a really cool organization. I think Sue McMillan. Anyways, I'll send it in the notes. But there's a panel about having a family and being in the restaurant. And this girl in the audience was a culinary student asking, and she had a job, and she asked the advice of the the people on the panel. I think it was like Beverly Kim and Catherine Miller and a bunch of Anyways, she's like, what should I do? Like now, I'm about to have a kid. What's your advice of how do I keep my job, or what should I do? And it was like radio silence. They're like, I don't really have an option for you. I don't know. Because think about it. If you're a line cook and you're about to have a kid, what do? There's not a lot of options. And so I think, what you all are doing, I appreciate that you say, look, you're a small part of it, but like, that's what it takes, to start this thing and show that it's possible. And there's still, I'm sure, a lot more that you all, are going to work on trying to do. It's not easy, but, even if it takes 10 years, like it's the only way that the restaurant industry really survives in the way that we want it to, is if we figure out a way that people can actually live and also work in the restaurant,
Yeah. Can I just add one thing to that idea though, which I think is really like an important thing. And I think like I'm very open about, is that like, we have to also talk about like, how do we increase our margins as a business, like as a restaurant, like as the industry? Because I think like there are two things happening simultaneously, right? Like benefits cost money, but like restaurant margins are shrinking. So like those two things, when they happen in parallel, usually spell disaster.
Yeah.
And I think like it's much easier if you're a hyper well capitalized like restaurant to get off like do these things where you're investing, or like, and like, if you have a huge restaurant group where you have like 2 restaurants that are profitable and 5 that are not, and they all just kind of feed each other, like you can do those things. But like, I think for us, like smaller operators, right, that like build businesses between $1 and $4 million a year, I think for businesses like that, I think it's really important to start thinking about margin. And like the only way you can do these great things for your team without like thinking about it all the time is by increasing your margin. Because like if we have great margin, then you can do these things and you don't go like, you're not worried about like, how do I keep the lights on?
100%, man. I think it's I've been talking about
we
this.
don't talk about that enough.
No,
we don't talk about that.
I think a big problem is that, and by the way, it's not actually just relegated to single unit restaurants, because problems scale, and I mean, I've
totally.
I've had to run small restaurants, but also like large multi-unit, and that shit doesn't get cheaper. I mean, sometimes it can when you have economy of scale, but for the most part, the problem I think is that the perception of what things should cost. Because when someone goes to Birdie's, if they are thinking this way, the thought is, I'm paying for that pasta. Pasta costs like $2. So, how much should this cost? And I can go to the store and buy mushrooms and they cost this. And the problem is you're not paying just for the food. You're paying for this whole experience, and you're paying for the design and the feel and the lights that are around you and the music that's on and the thought that went into that mushroom and the thought of like which farmers we're going to buy those things from, and to store all the plates and the food. And, I made this analogy with, Carolyn Glover was on a little bit ago, from Colorado, and
She's the best.
Yeah, we love her.
It's like, if you go to a spa, it's like $150 just to go. That's without like a massage, that's without like getting a massage done. It's just $150 to like enjoy the room and the heating and the water. And that's it. And then it's more if you want to buy a shake or a smoothie or get a massage. And I think I totally agree. Like margins can't be what they are. Like, prime cost at 60% is basically what the status quo has been. But to your point, like, how do you innovate if you don't have, margins greater than that? And I think part of it has to be that the perception of what food should cost needs to change. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, like the most expensive thing on the Birdie's menu is like $36, and I think like, I try to explain to people sometimes that like if we were a full service restaurant, that same dish would be $48. Like I don't think people can like wrap their head around that, think that's like another benefit of counter service is like we're allowed, like we can move the needle on like our margin if we need to by just moving things up or down $1 depending on like what like the month looks like. But I do think I think you're totally right. I think Tracy has done a lot of great work with like really innovate like smart menu design, keeping it really small and craveable and changes all the time. So people like even like our regulars, like we have more regulars because like Tracy will change the menu and like we're like, oh, let's go in,
And then they can see me, testing out the dish for the first time and tasting it, like when the first one's fired and figuring it out. And I think people, people love that energy. If we have to 86 something, because either A, it's not right, or B, we're out of it, we 86 it. But we're not sitting on like a ton of fish. And, we typically 86 our fish on Saturdays around 8 because we don't want to be, obviously we're not going to save that fish for Tuesday when we reopen. So we do a lot of things that are just like, keep it lean and mean. And, for us, we've really kind of figured out what works for us.
Yeah. I'm curious if the counter service has any impact on what people think the cost should be. Because I remember when, those,
for sure.
I mentioned that hot dog place, Bark. And I vividly remember like the first year we opened, we were making all our own sausages and making our own sauerkraut in these Chardonnay barrels. And it was like really fucking good, and we would charge $8 for a Pleasant Ridge cheddar stuffed sausage, on a bun, with like homemade sauerkraut, and it would be $8. And they would, people would complain, $8 for a sausage. Oh my God, I can go down the street. And if that same thing was, sliced and the charcuterie was like in a little pile and it was at Barbaloo or something, it would be $32. And I would always piss me off, but I'm curious if that same like thing happens with you all because it's counter service, if people think that it should just cost less because of that too.
I think it did. I think that's changed now. I think now the thing is like, why should I tip before I sit down? Like that's the thing that like I hear. I'm like, don't tip.
Don't they tip at the counter?
Be that guy. They do. But they're like, they were like, why do I have to tip? Like, I don't know what service it's going to look like because people still want to use it as a stick and a carrot.
They say that?
Yeah. And like, sometimes people are like, why do I have to tip? And I'm like, if you don't want to tip, man, don't tip, And then like what we do is actually the opposite of what I'm like, my instincts are, which are like, I want to like say, screw you, like fuck off, like all those things. But like the truth is what we do is we double down. So we just crush them with so much hospitality that like, and we send them maybe a gift along the way.
Yeah.
And like, it makes them feel like those people end up tipping more because we approach it with like this is a challenge. Let's approach it like as an opportunity for us to prove to them why they're wrong. You know what I mean? And I think instead of just telling them they're wrong, what we've started doing is like just showing them. And I think like to us, like that has been, for me at least, like this year, like for the first 2 years, I felt like we had to defend what we were doing.
Yeah.
And like, why are we doing counter service? Like it was a lot of like talking about it. Why are we doing it? Why are we doing it? Why are we doing it? These are the benefits. And for like 10% of people are never going to get it. 10% of people are going to hate it. And that's okay. I think as restaurant owners, like we have to all accept that like, you're not like Google reviews and Yelp are not the arbiter of like who you are. And I think like, I forget that sometimes, right? Like, but I think we have like 150, like, 180, 200 reviews. We've been over 3 years. And like, we have a line outside. Like, why am I not focused on that?
Yeah. 100%.
Like, why am I focused by like these like 4 people that are like, didn't get it when I should be putting all my energy into the people who do.
Yeah.
And I think like reframing some of this stuff for myself as small restaurant owners has been really helpful because we give a shit. Like we really care. I think we really care about our food. Like, are we always a perfect restaurant? Absolutely not. But I don't think as a team, I've ever felt like we haven't cared and we haven't pushed.
Yeah.
We were talking about this yesterday. I was like, for me, like the most important thing is like, we're pushing. We're always being ourselves. We're always growing. We're always trying to find like the best version of ourselves at the restaurant. And like we push our team really hard. I think like we expect a lot out of them, but like it's really critical, I think, for us as an industry to like, make sure you expect a lot out of people, but then give them a lot.
Yeah.
You know, give them what they need to be successful at what they do. And like, don't worry as much. I think you have to care about your guests when they're here. But like, if guests don't get the concept or don't get the idea, then it's like, that's okay. You know?
Well,
if
I mean,
they're talking about, hey, this steak is overcooked or undercooked, or like they're talking about like actual issues, like you have to listen. But if they come into the restaurant and they're like, I waited an hour, like I don't like this place. I'm like, you don't have to wait an hour. Like, go somewhere else. There's plenty of restaurants.
It's usually a good sign of something that's really a net new sort of good thing for the world is some amount of people should not like it because otherwise it's not, you know, it's not polarizing enough. But I'm curious how you'll think about this it's so funny with a restaurant. It's so personal. You know, when you open a typical business, you know, it's not a big it's not, I want to be careful for other, whatever, you know, accountants or whatever, you know, I don't know, plumber or something like, it hits you, right? So when you get like these reviews, whether they're good or they're bad, you associate it with yourself, you know, and it's really hard to separate like I'm good versus my restaurant is good, or I'm bad versus my restaurant is struggling. Do you all ever talk about that or think about that just between yourselves?
Yeah. So it's funny because Arjav is the one who will usually read the reviews, and I've kind of made it a point I never read them. It just affects my mind space. And when I like come up with a menu, I don't want to think about, you know, Joe who thinks that, you know, random not crappy restaurant, but like a chain restaurant is the best thing ever, a 5-star, and then we're a 2-star. Like, is that the person I'm going to cook for and start changing like what I do? Like, no, that's distracting. And so I think for me, it's more beneficial to put my blinders on and just kind of like, I just do what I do, stay focused on what I'm focused on, be with our team, see what our farmers have. And I just kind of like to cook like that. And I know who I am as a chef. I know who our team is. I know who Arjav and I are as business owners. I know our mission, you know, I know our values at Birdie's. I think what we do is authentic and real. And ultimately, if someone doesn't like it, it's like, no problem, go to the restaurant, you know? And I just don't, I just block it out, you know, because the haters will drain your energy, and you have so many other positive, amazing things to focus on in life, and you only have a certain amount of energy. And so I just really believe you have to protect it, because if you start letting your energy go away to negativity, that's just going to bring you down. It's going to drain you. And you want to, life is short, and save your energy for the good stuff.
But we also acknowledge, like, you know, we've had like, we're very aware of the fact that like we've been incredibly lucky with like some of the accolades we've gotten in a very short period of time since we opened. We're aware of that, right? And I think like that obviously changes expectations too of like the kind of restaurant we are, et cetera. And I think like one thing that we've really worked hard on is like just reminding each other like the reason we've had, you know, the like pleasure of having some of these things is because we are who we are, and like we're doing what we're doing. Like we can't suddenly change those things, you know? And I think we're just like really aware of that. You know, it's like we have to keep doing what we're doing and push the boundaries of what we're doing, and like explore what else is possible with like counter service, taking care of our team, you know, pushing margin both for the business so we can like invest in our like management team, especially like how do we continue to like create this virtuous cycle that works for all of our stakeholders. And I think for us, like the big lesson has been like, you know, just keep innovating on like your core competencies, you know, like keep like your head down and focus on what are you really great at, and then like keep expounding on that. Like don't start chasing the like, you know, the small little like distracting thing here and there. Just like focus on the things that like are really like you're great at, and then surround yourself with people who are better at the things that you're not good at.
Yeah. And honestly, thankfully, we just love what we do. You know, I love to cook, and our job loves service, you know, and I think it's easy to come back to do what we love to do and let go of the, you know, the nonsense talk. Like if it's constructive, yes, happy to listen to, happy to always want to get better. And so I'm not saying we're not open to any feedback. It's just the stuff that's like negative just to be negative and isn't constructive, like I don't have time for.
Yeah.
You're never as good as they say you are. You're never as bad as they say you are.
Exactly.
You know, like, that's how I feel
What
about it.
matters
It's like,
most is just, and it's clearly with you all, obviously, is that you just have to love what you do. And, I've owned several businesses now, and one thing I've learned is, I never get too excited about the good or too, like upset about the bad. And mostly that means like when something good happens, acknowledge it. That's great. But I'm still the same person I was yesterday. And because the same way, if something bad's going to happen tomorrow, no matter what.
Yeah.
And, if you're not doing what you love, none of that stuff matters anyways, but it quickly catches up with you. And I think you're right, Arjav. Like you all have had, really great, success and reviews. And I don't want to mention because you don't like the reviews, Tracy, but you just got nominated for James Beard. Like, there's a lot of good happening.
No, I mean, I love that, of course. I just mean like, I guess reviews, I'm referring to like the Google and Yelp.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
When I say that, I'm certainly thankful for all the positive.
But no, I love it. And it's and by the way, like I've never met you all before, and I've never even been to the restaurant, but it's very clear just, chatting with you two that you clearly like love what you do. And I have to imagine that shows in the food. I can't wait to come check it out. So let's talk about the food a little bit. Because by the way, congrats on the James Beard finalist. That's amazing. Can't wait.
Thanks, Josh.
See how that goes. It's a game changer. So this is sort of just a throwback to then think about what's happening today, only because, Tracy, and I'm sure Arjav, it's the same. I don't know a lot about the front of the house. Been back of house my whole life, but like, when you're cooking this food, I have to imagine, like, have you ever thought about like how does Mark Ladner or Michael Anthony or Shay show up in what you're doing today? Do you ever like see that in things that you're doing or things that you're cooking, or Wolfgang, or on the service side? Or
yeah, I mean, sure, daily. I mean, I I think when a lot of us were coming up through the time period we did, I started in New York around 2008, so it was certainly not like the old school generation, but it's different than it is in 2024. So we were still working the, extremely long weeks, not a lot of pay. And there was just like, I don't know, maybe it's people I was around. We're all just like in it to win it, in it to be our best, in it to learn, to be hungry. And so I was like 120% locked in. I wanted to work at like a Del Posto. I worked my 6th day. We had 2 days off. And then I worked my 6th day for free with pastry with Brooks. Because I wanted to learn, you know what I mean? And like we were all like very hungry, and I think I just absorbed it all, like the way, we make soups here, purees here. Like I learned from Shay, like how to sweat the onions till they're like super, super sweet. That's the base of your sauce. And then how to like fully cook, the veg, and like how to make that puree super creamy, and like all of like the very little things that go into something are so important. And a lot of our dishes have like 3 things on the plate, and someone looks at it like, that's it, and it's like, yeah, that's it, and I think what's hard about cooking up birdies is that it is so simple and there's nowhere to hide, and if it's wrong, it's like glaringly wrong, and so it's so simple, but as simple isn't easy. When it comes to making our pastas, like we don't make like Del Posto was, huge kitchen. The pasta line had fresh, dry, and risotto stations within the pasta line. And we just have like garde manger, roast, and then like a support position. That's it. And we have like 75 seats. And we cook all in minute. So it gets cranking, and it moves fast, and it's challenging. But we still cook obviously our pasta to order, build pan sauces. And the way in which we build our pan sauces is very much inspired by what I learned at Del Posto, and like the viscosity of the sauce and how long the pasta's in the pan and how much it's cooked. And, it's hard. It's hard to do that and also be cooking fish and meat at the same time, all of it. Like there's no sous vide, nothing's pre-cooked. You're flashing it. Like it's not easy, And so I think to do that all really well is a big challenge. A lot of the things I do with vegetables are inspired by my time at Blue Hill and with Mike at Gramercy. So much. I learned a ton from Mike. I was with Mike for 5 years. And, I made the soups for a year there before I got promoted to sous chef. I was tournat and I was like in charge of the soup. So every week I had a new soup. And then one day we never had soups on the menu at Birdie's for like the first year. And Arjav was like, I did a soup randomly, like just for tried it for a day. I was like, this might be a terrible idea. It's not shareable. This is dumb. And Arjav was like, oh my God, why aren't we doing soups? And so now we're like, yeah, okay, let's just be doing soups. Now like soup's kind of our thing. Like we're like a secret soup restaurant,
That's so funny. That's so funny.
Yeah. And now I don't have to think about a soup. I'm just like rattle off ingredients and we go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I think about my mentors and the people I worked with literally every day. I mean, that stuff is like embedded in you,
Yeah, I think that's honestly like one of the beautiful things about cooking is it's an everyday thing. Anytime I'm washing basmati rice and the rice is going through my fingers and I'm like looking for the clear water, like Floyd Cardoz comes to mind every single time. Or if I'm passing a sauce through a tammy, there's a sous chef I had who would like yell at me for not. But there's a million of those things, and I think that's the beautiful thing about food, especially when you care and you're learning so much. And I'm sure Arjav, I don't mean to like, throw it all in the kitchen here because I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff on the service side as well. Like I think that's a beautiful thing about restaurants, right? It's like there's so many of those memories that once you do actually then have your own place, or even if you don't, like those things that just stick with you forever because you do them so often,
And like making a salad, like I was on a garde manger station every single restaurant I worked at. I never walked into a restaurant as a sous chef or a CDC or an executive chef. Like I always start at the bottom on garde manger. I was a line cook for many, many years, and garde manger is still my favorite station. And like I love making a really nice salad. And there's so many things that can go wrong with making a salad that a lot of young cooks don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And like I think about Leah at Lula and at Crew and every restaurant I worked at, like the principles to making a nice, fluffy, properly dressed salad.
Yeah.
And like something Shay used to say, he was like, everything you make, try to make it the best anyone's ever made it. Even if it's failing meal, whatever it is, just try to make it the best. And I think that's what we always try to do is just make it the best. Is it always the best? No. I mean, we cook very spontaneously here. I don't do much recipe testing, if any. And so I think that kind of spontaneous style might have like kind of been like passed down like from Boulay to like Shay and Dan a little bit. And I picked a little bit of that up. And it's all, I never want to take credit for like what we do here. It's like all so many years of training under these really smart people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny when people are like, Tracy, you're like an overnight success. I'm like, yeah, it took like 18 years to become an overnight success.
Yeah.
It's like not.
Oh.
And
a lot of hard work.
There's no shortcuts to the like discipline of cooking or service or whatever it is. It's like a craft,
Yeah, 100%. And okay, so you change the menu every day, and this is where I ask questions because
just about just about. There's some days when the menu is like the seasons aren't changing, but
even if it's every week or every month or something, like you're changing it often. So I'm imagining there's not a ton of recipes. So I guess one, I'm sure you have some sort of like, base recipes or like that you're like using to, fold into things or, and you were talking about like, Michael Anthony, or if you have like a chicken liver mousse or something, I'm sure there's a recipe for that. I hope. But, from what I've heard you speak about, there is a lot of like just feel, and I'm curious, how do you, make sure that the cooks are cooking through the sort of the vision of what you want every day when there's not as much structure? And also, are the cooks making their own dishes as well to go on the menu?
Not really right now. Right now we're still like, we're hitting our third year this summer. And I definitely like pick their brain. I'll be like, all right, guys, what do you want to cook today? What are you feeling next week? We're getting this and any ideas. And so we'll kind of like talk about the menu like that. Or like a few weeks ago, I had a cook say, hey, we have a lot of, strawberries that are like really soft. Do you want me to make jam or something? I was like, yeah, make a jam, we'll make it delicious and then we'll season it together, adjust acid, salt, whatever. And then, okay, so we've got strawberry jam and let's just throw it under this flourless, chocolate cake and 90s vibes, creme fraiche, go. You know what I mean? So like, I think that a couple of things like that have happened before.
It's still very much Tracy's.
It's still very much mine, but I still like to, pick people's brains, and then we'll taste things together. I'll be like, what do you guys think it needs? And it's like part teaching and part, us cooking together. You know what I mean? And in terms of your like recipe question, I've had to get better at writing recipes by nature of me having a child a year and a half ago. I got really sick when I got pregnant, and then I was like, I had no sous chef at the time. I knew who I was going to promote to sous chef at month 5 or 6 and get her trained up. So whenever I deliver the baby, then I can, be with the baby a lot, and especially for those first couple months. But then I got really ill like week 5, and it was hard for me to be there and prep. And I'd always been, wrote myself a prep list every day. I was the only one who could expedite. I was teaching, showing every day, and that just immediately I'm out. I'm out of the system that I'm very much a part of, and that was extraordinarily challenging because I was not prepared to not be able to work. I just couldn't stand up. I couldn't hold down water. I was like, it was rough. So in that moment, I learned that I need to have some recipes. So like we have like certain vinaigrette styles, and then like that kind of changes, the vinegar, or maybe it's like the ratio of garlic, depending on our food's like American seasonal with Italian and French influences. So something more Italian or French is kind of always what I'm asking, because I'm really inspired by Italian French grandmothers. But it is with Central Texas produce, and then woven in the techniques I've kind of learned through my training.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've learned to have some recipes, and I'm trying to have more, especially as I dream of a cookbook someday. I'm like, okay, gotta be writing these things down. But to answer your question, it's very challenging, and I'm trying to get better at writing some recipes.
Yeah.
But I think there's a couple people on the kitchen team who like Tracy can say like, this is what I want. Like, this is like the idea I'm going for, and they can cook it. And then Tracy is very close, and then Tracy will season, like she was saying, and adjust. So like, and I think over the last 2 years, like the 2 most senior members of like the kitchen team have absorbed like what Tracy, like her style of cooking, I think. And the way like she likes to approach her sauce work, or like just the development of an idea. And like I think they now understand like the ingredients she likes using, how like the kind of vinegars she likes using in certain things, and
how we sweat aromatics. And like, so yeah, for example, our exec sous chef EJ, she's been with me since we opened, and she worked at Gramercy Tavern with Arjav in that chapter. And she's someone for a very long time I've been able to just rattle off ingredients, especially like when we first opened. I would just be like, sweat this, deglaze with that, add that, go. You know what I mean? And like, she was like, okay. It wasn't like, oh, wait, can you write it down for me? Can you give me a gram amount? Like, she just got it, and she just.
It feels like that too a little bit.
So like, yeah, EJ's amazing, and Phil's essentially my daytime cook. That's been with us for
2 years.
Almost 2 years. Yeah. And he does a lot of our cooking before I get in. And so a lot of I'm trying to get better writing recipes, like I said, but he's good at going with his gut too. I'll like sketch out a recipe. I'm like, if this feels wrong in your gut, taste it and like adjust, and let's talk about it and taste it.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's like sometimes, the weight of everything is one thing that's going to change, the pear is going to have a different sweetness level and things like that. But like the explanation of like what, of what you want to happen. I mean, it can be verbal, right? But it's still a recipe, right? Like, how do you like to sweat your vegetables, and at what point are they like how much do you want to crash the sauce, things like that. That's all part of it. I am curious because Arjav, you're pretty deep into the wine world. Are there times when it sounds like most of the time the genesis of your food is like, I have an ingredient that I love, I have an idea. Is there ever a time when the genesis is, holy shit, I got this really incredible bottle of wine, and I'd love to have something that goes really well with this, and then you guys work on.
Never. Like I'm fundamentally against that idea.
Oh, really?
Like I think for me, like I'm driven by food. Like I'm in this industry because I love eating, and I love restaurants. I love kitchens. Like all my best friends have always been cooks. I kind of fell into the wine thing, but because I didn't have the chops to like cook, I just like was like, I need to hang out with chefs and marry one. But I think like for me, like wine at its best is in the restaurant setting is like a condiment to the food, right? Like it's, I think Danny Meyer used to always say it was like the ketchup on a burger, it's like it adds a little sweetness, some acidity to balance everything out. And like we think about like the By the Glass program, especially, we have about a dozen wines on the By the Glass list based around what Tracy's cooking. So like I'll think about like, okay, next month it's gonna be hot. Like I know Tracy's probably gonna have some chilled dishes on the menu. What kind of wines do we want? You know, do we want chilled reds by the glass that time of year if we want red. Like we don't have to have like a full bodied wine on the list. There's no rules to that. It's like kind of built around what goes well with the food, because we don't want the wine to distract from the food or overpower the food. We just always want it to be as in service of like a great dining experience.
I love that, man. I wish not all sommeliers would say that, but that's amazing, man. I love it. It's like it's so true, and also very Danny Meyer, but also you know, I think you've said this before too. And look, there are times when you want to understand, you know, the story behind a wine and the producer and, you know, and things like that. But yeah, for the most part, you know, you're eating food, and that wine is kind of like, you know, again, accretive to the experience, as opposed to like, you know.
And you want guests to kind of lead that, right? Like I don't want to, like my least favorite thing is go to a restaurant and like they're like, oh, there's the like wine guy, so let's just talk his ear off about wine. Like I don't, like I'm gonna try to hang out with my wife and my kid, and like don't necessarily like so we train the team actually to like give people exactly what they need, tell them what the grape is, with the name of the producer. You know, if you're opening the bottle of wine and need to like engage them, like maybe give them a little like 10-second blurb on the producer. But we try not to like make wine more than it is. It's an agricultural product. It's like something we put in our bodies. Like let's respect it. Let's respect the people that, you know, commit their lives to growing these grapes and producing these incredible wines. But the way we honor those wines by treating them with like reverence, the way we serve it, the proper temperature, making sure we store it correctly, and make sure that we're trained to have those conversations. But we let guests lead us into those conversations. We never assume that like a guest wants to have that conversation. Yeah. If that makes sense.
All right. So you two work together. And you have a kid now. Your kid is like 15, 16 months, like that?
He's 18 months almost. Yeah.
All right. I have 2 kids, and it is...
How old?
I have a 3-year-old, and my son will be 5 next month. His birthday's the day before mine. And a couple things. One, probably goes without saying, but like, it is just so much harder on the mom than the dad. Like, I mean, maybe in a few years it'll change, but like, it's, you know, meaning like when my kid's like 10 or something, but like, wow, like it's just so much on the mom the first couple of years at least. And it's funny, we were talking about, I was talking about this with Caroline as well, because her and her husband, the restaurant together. And how do you two manage like the distribution of help and support? And then you could just tell me to fuck off if this is not a thing, but like, is there any sort of like dealing with resentment of you having more than the dad? I haven't met a mom that didn't have some, but it's tough.
Yeah, I definitely, it's funny you bring up Caroline, because we both had long fertility struggles. And so we kind of became friends via DM, like, oh, you're going through this too, and you're a chef and doing IVF in the shops. So we got to connect over that, and then being new moms and chefs. So yes, I've definitely felt all of the things you're talking about. I think for me, since I was so ill when I was pregnant, that was kind of my hardest chapter, was actually being pregnant and not being prepared to be in very limited capacity abruptly. So once we had Remy, I was like, okay, at least I can kind of function. But yes, like to name it, like the breastfeeding, it's a lot. All the things that go around, you know, they say air quotes, mom brain, you know, of just like,
the list.
Have this. Do we have the list, the ongoing lists of everything that needs to happen. I felt like we've had a lot of those conversations. I think at the beginning of any relationship, industry or not, it's like, how many diapers have you changed today? Because this is how many I've changed, you know, and like, have you thought about the doctor's appointment? So for us, I think, and yes, we've had all of those conversations. We've gotten to be in a pretty good place now where it's kind of like, okay, Arjav will own the doctor stuff. I'll own,
like travel, feeding,
packing. Yeah. Our job stepped up with like cook. Now he's, you know, 1.5 years, so he eats solid foods and stuff. So we split cooking meals. We've just kind of like figured out a divide and conquer mentality, not at this age. But yes, I definitely think the first, especially 3 months, there are certain things that the traditional mom will just take on. So I think just like kind of naming it, and me naming like I'm feeling a little resentful, and just kind of talking about it, has been really healthy for us. Um, Especially because Arjav's a really fantastic dad, and he's like, what do I do? What do I do? Just tell me what to do. And I'm like, well, why don't you know? Why don't you instinctively know?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's pretty common.
Oh, it's
in a lot
100%. We have same exact conversations with my wife. We have couples therapy, even still to manage it, and we did it ahead of time because we knew. And yeah, a lot of it's just like naming. Like, I understand that there's resentment, and I understand why. It makes sense, and let me just see what I can do to help as much as possible. But it's a lot of work.
One thing that's totally. I think one thing that's really, really helped us, would you say, is that like we've gotten a lot more organized. I think in the absence of organization, I think we were all kind of flailing for a long time, like just kind of reacting. Oh, the restaurant needs this. Oh, but like, what are we doing at home? Like, now, like, I think Tracy's gotten incredibly good at like blocking everything on her calendar, including like, I need to think about the menu for an hour. Like, leave me alone. It's on my calendar. And I think...
Yeah, living by the calendar has been something that has been really beneficial. Like, we do this thing, you'll probably do it too, which we didn't know about the first year of being new parents, was on the Sunday meeting where we like map out the week, map out what our childcare options are, or what blocks are, who's making what meals, what meetings do we have, when are we working out? Because you got to make time for yourself.
Yep.
Obviously you can't just be the giver and not fill your own cup.
Yeah.
So like just thinking about all of those things rather than where we were for a long time, especially when I was ill, when I was pregnant, which was living day to day, like, oh God, we're out of this. Oh God, we're out of that. Especially the way I order is like from farmers. So like you can imagine the chaos and, oh, we don't have this today. And oh, where are we getting this today? And Arjav didn't know all the nuanced relationships I had with my farmers and how I ordered. So you can imagine the chaos that was. But now I feel like we've really gotten a grasp of our lives via our calendar, via like a 30-minute Sunday meeting to just get on the same page. And, oh, you've got that meeting. I didn't realize this week was so crazy for you. And if we're aligned and we're good as husband and wife, then like, we're also going to be good as partners in our business. But like, if we're fighting, like, that's inevitably going to trickle into Birdie's. We need to make sure that we're good so we can be great for everyone else.
Yeah, the calendar's
like
key.
We weren't investing as much time or energy into like our relationship either. It became about the baby in the restaurant, like for like the first 8 months. And I think like I felt resentful about that. And I think like, we talked about it, and like now, for example, like every week, for example, Tracy and I'll always go get lunch like once a week. And it's just like, and like we call it like our EQ lunch.
Sounds very corporate-y.
Yeah, but it's like, this is where we just check in and see how each other are doing. And like, it's a non-negotiable. Like, we do it every week. Like, the day can move, but like, we're not going to not do it. And it's like, how are you doing? Like, we can talk about work. It doesn't have to like, we have dates where we don't talk about work, but like at these EQ meetings, it's like, how are you doing? Oh, I'm stressed about like this relationship at work, or I'm stressed about, this food festival that's coming up, or like, we're stressed about these 3 weeks of travel we have back to back to back with Remy. Like, how are we going to manage that? And then we'll talk about like how that makes us feel. And then we'll do like the Sunday afterwards, we'll talk about how to maybe address some of those things through like creating of lists or priorities. And like, we've gotten better about like creating lists of like what we need to get done. And then like, are these energizing like things de-energizing? We're kind of neutral, and like kind of to make sure like if we're doing something that empties our cup, we're also refilling it. But it all starts with us, right? Like, and I think like as much as we want to take care of our team, if we're not taking care of each other and ourselves, like it's very hard for us to be great leaders.
Yeah.
And I think acknowledging that and realizing like it actually begins with us. Like, if we're good to each other, if we're in a good healthy mental space, and we're going to be much more effective at leading our team and like the spirit we want them to. Are we perfect at it? No. Like, there are nights like Tracy doesn't sleep, or I don't sleep, and we're cranky, and like we come to work, that crankiness spills over sometimes. Like, that's just life. But just all we can do is like do our best to make sure that it is like the rarest of like occurrences. It's not like an everyday thing.
Yeah, 100%. We do the same thing with scheduling time. It sounds like so like, we have to like schedule this thing, but you have to, because otherwise, with the baby, it always comes first. And if you don't find that time, you know, and I remember some of the first two years. I blocked out a lot of it. I do remember that, like, cleaning up toys. Like, you have to play every toy to clean it, to put it away. You're like matching giant animals just to put the puzzle away and things like that. But I'm sure it's the same for you. So I'll just ask because, I learned so much, but like, how has Remy like helped you in terms of how you lead, how you prioritize your time, how you interact with your team differently than before you had Remy?
I mean, he is definitely without a doubt our number one priority. Um, I think being a parent for me just really reminds me to always lead with empathy and always make sure there's just like the human aspect. There's something about seeing a toddler and their excitement and energy every day to just kind of remind you what matters in life, you know? And so ultimately, I think that even though we're still very serious about what we do and we love our restaurant and our food and our hospitality, like, we're still just cooking dinner, you know? And what really matters ultimately is like, is our family good? Is our team well? Is everyone's like mental health in a good place and physical health in a good place? All right, like, we're good. Let's not get lost in the small stuff, because ultimately what matters is, the relationships we have with each other, and our guests. That's ultimately why we're doing what we do and taking care of our family. So I think it's helped just really. I think we opened Birdie's with a really good head on our shoulders because of all the time we had leading up to it. But I think being a parent just allows us to remember what really matters in life.
Yeah, I think for me, it's been perspective, like what Tracy was talking about, patience, just like not something that's like a naturally occurring like Arjav like trait. Something that I've had to like realize I need to develop. So I've worked really hard on developing my patience. And then I think the last piece of it is, I think the thing I'm most proud of is we still remain a great team. Like, I think we still are madly in love with each other. At least I'm madly in love with her. And I think the last piece of it is like we've taken some of the things that we saw were like non-negotiables for ourselves and said like, oh, we need to make this a thing for the team. So like our AGM just had a baby like in January, and we now offer like we have a family leave program for the team. So like, including the line staff. So our managers get 2 months at full salary. And our line team gets $500 a week. It's a perfect. I wish we could give more, but like it's something.
It's amazing, man.
So that like,
Amazing.
if they do have a kid, like they know they have a job waiting for them when they come back, and they have something hitting their bank account every month, so that like they're not so stressed about like where the next dollar is going to come from. And I think that peace of mind, like I think about like how all I wanted to do for the first 2 months was like be a dad. Like I didn't care about anything. I still don't really care that much about anything else. But like there's something that like it just reorients you and like and it also fills your cup. Like I feel like I understand like a deeper side of hospitality. Like one of the things we do now is like when I'm talking about a lineup today is like when people with kids come in, we now like point out where the changing table. We put a changing table in our bathrooms. Like we point out where the changing table is. When parents walk in, so they know like, hey, we've thought about this. Like we care about you. Like something we're going to talk about today at lineup is like asking about the kind of pacing they want for their meal. Because like if there's a hard out, like like there's a baby that needs to go to sleep. Like that's an act of hospitality. Be like, we're happy to go like at our normal pace, but if there's like, a bedtime that you're worried about, let us know what it is so that we can like adjust what we're doing. And like that costs us nothing, but it's just the act of thinking about it that suddenly makes this parent feel like,
oh yeah,
oh shit, this is actually going to be a different dining experience. So we were in Philly and like we were shocked at how many restaurants didn't have high chairs.
Like casual restaurants.
Like casual pizzerias.
Yeah.
And we're like, these are small things that we can all pay attention to, but that create a like when we go out, we want to eat and drink. Like we're ordering the whole menu, we're drinking great wine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like if you were gonna
But
be
sometimes we're also like realistic, like, hey, is there any way we can be out an hour and a half?
Totally.
Like that,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And kind of asking them before we order to make sure we're on the same page and they feel like they can do that, you know? So I think, and we also ask people because sometimes parents don't want to rush and they're like, no, we're good. He's chill. Like we want the 2-hour experience, you know, we're here to dine. And so like, we just want to make sure that we see them.
Yeah.
We want them to have the best experience with their family. So
smart. Yeah. We get in and we order right away. Like we're like, how long is it until meltdown? So we get the orders in right away. You know, it's interesting. And I think as Remy gets a little bit older, you'll probably see this even more. But the thing that has stuck with me the most now as a parent that has changed the way that I lead is that you really start to see how people are separated from the problems or the things that they do. You know, if your kid like breaks something nice in your house, like you don't yell at them, or like or if they start screaming frantically and just being like when someone's over, you don't yell at them. You know, like something's wrong. There's something in their brain that they can't express, and they don't have the ability to like share why, and that's how they're doing it, or they have some sort of feeling. And actually, everybody is that. Everybody that does something, in your business, in your life, there's something there. Maybe they had a bad day. Maybe they're holding some sort of resentment towards you for something that they need to talk about, or whatever it is. There's almost always like some reason why they're doing the thing that they're doing. And I find that it's helped me a lot to like stop and like, I wonder why they did that. As opposed to before, to be honest, I would be like, what the hell? Like, why did you do that? Like, I would kind of like go right after them. And I don't think it's a softness, but it's more just like a new set, like a new like curiosity, and not going right to like judgment when somebody does something wrong. I mean, this is coming from restaurants that we all come from, like where just Boulay would just walk in and tell you you're a terrible person and walk away. So there's a big gap from what I came from to now, but it's exciting. Sorry, you were about to say something?
Did you worked at Boulay?
Yeah. That's where I met Jess Duplicate. Well, she wasn't Jess, she was Jess Marr back then. But I worked there with that was what Tosi was there, and Evan Rich, and Cesar, and I mean that was before I went to
the OG
Cafe
squad.
Gray. So
Yeah.
What year was that?
That was 2004.
Mm-hmm.
Right after Tabla, and then then went to Cafe Gray for that. Anyways, we're wrapping up here because you all have. I'm assuming you have line up soon. I didn't get to ask this to. This is totally random now, and this is actually selfishly just for me. I know all the good spots. Like, there's a bunch of good restaurants in Austin, and I'm gonna obviously come check out yours next time. But like, where do you get a good breakfast taco, pizza, and Thai food? Are there options for that in Austin?
Thai food's hard. I think nothing like Uncle Boone's. I think, but like Austin has its own kind of like things that they do really well, like strengths. I think like one of our favorite restaurants is Kanji, which is a Guyanese inflected like Caribbean restaurant, run by our good friend Val, which is incredible. We go to Este a lot, which is like coastal Mexican food. That's just like, for me, it's like one of those talented people like I've ever met. Breakfast tacos, we like the OG kind of Veracruz flour tortilla amigos poblanos vibes. Like, I think if it ain't broke, don't fix. Joe's is pretty good too. Like, it's like an OG kind of spot.
Joe's?
Yeah.
I'm writing these down.
Pizza, say, All Day and Buffalo are probably the two best pizza places in the city. All Day, if you want like New York style pizza, or Neo New York, as I like to call themselves, and then Buffalo, which is like one of the best wine lists in the city.
Oh, and Fiore just opened up a pizza spot, right?
Yeah, Bambino is really great. Actually, I forgot about Bambino. Bambino is awesome.
Yeah, brand new.
Really fun. I love Fio.
Is there good ice cream there a good ice cream spot in Austin?
We'd like going to this place called Dolce Neve, which is like a gelato spot.
Okay. What's next? Are you thinking about another spot? One thing I was going to actually ask is there's a line. I'm assuming because there's no reservations. It reminds me of Franny's. You probably went there in Brooklyn back in the day.
Oh yeah. Love Franny's.
Is there a cocktail bar in the works so they have some place to wait?
No, but we are allowed to serve wine in line.
Nice.
So Arjav has also a great NA list, so people can wait in line and have a beverage of their choosing.
Oh, that's cool.
So sometimes people drink baller champagne in line, High Life, or like a, I don't know, refreshing non-alcoholic drink. So we don't have a physical bar per se, but you can just stand and have a beverage.
Awesome.
I think like for us, like we, kind of like leaning into our core competencies. Like I've never been a bartender. I don't know, like, could we open a cocktail bar that's pretty good? Like, I think so. But we like investing our time into things that we think really add a lot of value. And there's incredible bars already in Austin. I think for us, like, there's so many great bars in Austin. Like, I don't know if like we have a perspective or a voice that would really add to the conversation. I think for us, like, it'll be restaurants. We definitely want to do like a couple more restaurants, but I don't think we feel like an urgency. Like I always think about how Danny waited like 10 years between Moon Square Cafe and Gramercy. I think when you're in it, like you sometimes feel like, oh, I've got this moment, or like we got to do this, and like people are throwing offers our way, and like I think our general like sense is that like it's important to kind of slow down when everybody else thinks you should speed up, because I think we're like at this inflection point where what we do and the way we think about like our our growth over a 10-year time horizon, this next 2 years will be really important to like think about how we want to accomplish like our goals, and also establish what those goals are, right? And I think like I don't want to like ever be a restaurant group. I don't think Tracy does either. That's like, oh, let's just open restaurants. Like, we need to have a why. What are we adding? What is like?
What's our connection to the food?
Are we going to give a shit? Like, are we going to really care?
Yeah. Does honestly, from a business perspective, does the deal make sense? Is the space right? Like, there's a lot of, we don't want to open another restaurant for the sake of opening one. Everything has to be right. Like the right timing for our family, for our business. Do we have the right people in place where we're going to be promoted and have a new opportunity? Is there a cuisine that fits in the right space with the right real estate deal? It's so multifaceted that it just kind of depends.
Yeah.
Always starts, but the one truth is it always starts with like life design for us. Like, what is our life? Like, do we want to have another kid? Or do we want, like, we ask ourselves these questions before we talk about like the business, because like it has to fit. Or like, and the most like one of the most important pieces of that is like, do we have talent that we want to grow? I think like, do we have people on our team that are ready for that next big step? And like, I think if and when that happens, I think we'll be ready to open a restaurant. But I think we don't feel like an urgency. Like there are moments where I'm like, oh, we got to take advantage of all this incredible like press that we have, and like this moment. And then like
he's pushing, and I'm always like,
Tracy's always great to remind him. Like,
like it's got to be right.
But I mean, you're right. Like I find like the biggest driver usually for another restaurant is upper mobility for the team, right? You have this team and they're great, and like, okay, now I've been here for 4 years. What now? And you don't always actually have to open another restaurant to do that. You could sort of horizontally expand. Just come up with CPG thing, or like some other sort of concept in the morning or something, and they run that. That does. I always find that does tend to be like the catalyst of like, okay, we're either going to lose this person because they've been here 10 years, or we we do something new and we give them a spot or something. But sounds like you guys got some time before that.
We're busy with the present right now.
Hey, you got your hands full with Remy too, so
it's true.